Hi, everyone. We're super excited to be here. And first, we wanted to thank Andre and the team for having us and for this great conference. I think we enjoyed yesterday and today, and it's super great. And today, we'd like to talk to you about how making tough decisions can either bring you to success or make you a failure. And to start, kind of warm up after lunch, we want to go through a quick quiz. Can you please shout out from the audience, what do you think is in common to all of these brands behind me? Exactly. So all of them failed. Now, the interesting question is why? And when we think about it, when we read business books about it, and we read TechCrunch about it, the word that often pops up is innovation. And we are not sure we agree with that. Because if we look at this, these are pure innovations by the most successful software companies out there today, and we think all of them failed, at least to some extent. So we don't believe that innovation is the cure for cancer. Innovation cannot solve all of your problems. So when going back to these guys again, we're thinking, so why did they fail? And we think that's because they didn't change. And they did change eventually, but they didn't change when they were at the peak of their success. When they were the highest, the most effective player in their markets, they didn't change. And the American sociologist Arthur Stinkum in the late 70s coined the phrase operational imprinting. And operational imprinting is a phenomenon where an organization or business or product tends to freeze, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, when they're at the peak of their prowess and the peak of their success. I mean, we feel for that, right? When you look at this tree, which you helped grow from a small little spring, and it took you all the way up, it's very, very tough to let go, to stop hugging this tree, and to look around you and to see there is a forest of new opportunities and new things you can do. So we would like to share with you today the organizational imprinting that we went through with AutoCAD Mobile. But first, a very quick introduction. You don't need it after Andre's presentation, but as Marty mentioned before lunch, we served in the IDF, just like every other Israeli, and we had long careers there. Today, I'm Edik, and I run the AutoCAD Mobile team out of Tel Aviv.
And I'm Maayan, head of product for AutoCAD Mobile. Talking to you about these examples we discussed just minutes ago, we're not here to say that success or failure is solely in the hands of the product manager. But we do believe that as PMs, we can have huge impact on the business. Now, we're here to talk about changes today, and changes has many organizational aspects. Obviously, we will now focus on the product management aspect and how we as PMs tend to respond to changes. I assume you will agree with me if I'll say that as product managers, we often find ourselves in the epicenter of change. And we like to compare changes to waves. So let's imagine that every new market trend, every new technology that is disrupting the market, even internal reorganizations or new customer requests are basically just like waves. And as product managers, we are surrounded by them. Some of them are smaller. Some of them are much more like tsunamis. And we're there trying to find our way in the ocean. And why won't we start with understanding how we respond to changes in general as human beings? And I think it's important to start by putting this on the table. Changes are good, but they're also very scary. And therefore, they sometimes tend to lead us to somewhat defensive behaviors. For instance, whenever we discover a new market trend, we sometimes prefer to avoid facing it and come up with various organizational excuses, such as, well, it doesn't really fit the company's strategy, or why won't we let the execs decide on this? I assume it's familiar to you. Or, whenever we realize there is a new technology that is disrupting our vertical, we sometimes tend to start resisting it and cling on to the fact that no customer have ever asked for this, so we convince everyone, including ourselves, that we just don't need this. By this, we are basically advocating for faster horses. And you know what? I think it makes sense. Because as product managers, what we're used to do, what we're taught to do, is to say no. This is what keeps us focused. It's almost like a reflex for us. So whenever something new comes in, this would be the first thing that we'll do. It's almost as if it's part of our DNA to keep saying no and always ask why. But when changes arise, it's not necessarily beneficial for us. We believe that one of the hardest traits of being a product manager is the ability to identify those precious moments where what we should do is negate these reflexes so we will be able to take the right decision. Often enough, this can be the differentiator between long-term success or short-term failure. These key moments, when they are fully embraced, is where product managers can make true impact on the entire organization. The reason we are here today talking to you about this is because just recently we went through a very similar experience. A change, or should I say a tsunami, just hit us in the face. And we felt it on our skin, how we fall victim to all the mentioned psychological effects. Luckily, we managed to pull ourselves out of it, and being here today, sharing it with you, just seems like the right thing to do, as we hope other product managers will be able to avoid at least some of the mistakes we did along the way.
But first, let's start with kind of introducing our product. By a show of hands, who here knows what AutoCAD is? Awesome! So I was expecting half of the audience, but I see about 80% here. But for those of you who don't know what it is, AutoCAD is a 35-year-old software, mainly running on desktop, that allows people to build and design anything. So from cars to bridges to buildings to rocket ships, odds are it started its way as a drawing in AutoCAD. Now, AutoCAD Mobile, surprisingly enough, is AutoCAD on mobile. And our user base was a bit different than the traditional desktop guys who were building all of the things for this past 3 decades. And as far as mobile apps go, as far as productivity tools go, we were just crashing it, right? Our business graphs looked like the proverbial hockey sticks on any KPI you can think of. Users loved the product, and you don't have to take our word for it. Open your favorite app store right now, go to the app page, and read the reviews. People are raving about it. It helps them get their jobs done, and it's effective, it's efficient, it's cool. And most importantly, the team loved it. Going back to Marty's talk, the team felt empowered, and they felt pride of building a product that people use, people love, and it helps them create a better world. So we were super successful. We were at the peak of our success. Yay to us. But then, as Maayan mentioned, a big change came over. And this change stemmed from a huge trend in the market, which I think all of us can experience as users. And it's called cross-platform. Today, we, as people, don't care which device are we using. Desktop, laptop, tablet, mobile, watch, it doesn't matter. We want our products to help us get our jobs done, to deliver their value, no matter where we are, when we are, just when we need it. Okay? And we had a very tough decision at our hands. On the one hand, we could have doubled down on our success. We could have kept building the best mobile AutoCAD app ever, using any buzzword technology you can think of. AR, VR, machine learning, going to Mars, landing on the moon, you name it, we could have built it. On the other hand, we could have deprioritized our own success. We could have realigned with our siblings from AutoCAD Web and AutoCAD Desktop and plunge all into this new and entire world, which was entirely not familiar for us, of the cross-platform ecosystem.
So we decided to wing it, and we tried to do what? To do both. But guess what? We just failed, and we failed big time. But during this failure, we learned a lot. We learned that the move to cross-platform is much more complex than what we anticipated, and that it includes 3 parts: business, operational, and infrastructural. On the business side, we had to change our KPIs. That was pretty easy and straightforward. On the operational side, things got a bit more tricky, as we needed to completely change our internal development processes. That required a lot of socializing and a few days of offsites, but with the right amount of leadership, it was definitely doable. But the heftiest price we had to pay was on the infrastructural side. Basically, in order to support cross-platform workflows and needs, we needed to rewrite most of the existing infrastructure of the app. And we wanted to do it fast. Now, here is a pickle for you. So I feel like I can feel comfortable to say that we were just exhibit A of all the psychological effects that I mentioned earlier. We started with avoidance. So we set up long meetings in which we created a plan for a plan. And we used whiteboards and slides and basically did everything we could in order to postpone this decision and not to take it. When avoidance didn't work anymore, we had a great solution. We just moved on to resistance. So we tried to pull out data that will prove our bias and put as many people as we could in one room in order to convince us that the cross-platform direction is not where we should go and that there are much more important initiatives to work on right now. Bottom line, we tried every trick in the book in order not to pick this path. And the brutal truth behind all of these activities is that they were just symptoms. They were symptoms to the fact that we were completely stuck. We weren't executing or delivering in any of the two directions. Things that would used to take us around 3 days to ship would now take us about a month, because suddenly people were spending 4 days just to define what needs to be defined. Even the general atmosphere in the office was becoming gloomier and gloomier every day. And if you were to ask the developers how they feel, they would tell you that they feel like they're working very hard, but they're also running full gas on neutral. And we found ourselves in the middle of a lot of miscommunication with unclear goals and an overall mess.
Fun times. I guess you all can imagine how fun is that to work in such an environment. Maybe some of you can even relate to that in your companies. Our condolences. And I can vividly remember one of these meetings. I think it was we were retrospecting one of the failed plans for a plan, something, doesn't matter. We sat with our leadership team yet again, and I just had it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, literally hijacked the entire meeting, came to the whiteboard, took a pen, and doodled the plan.
Well, it wasn't really a plan. It was much more of a conceptual idea to where we should go. But it did really help us to zoom out, understand where we are, kind of give us a map and a North Star to follow.
Well, yeah, usually my plans are more concepts than plans, but jokes aside, after a couple of weeks, we did have a plan. And this plan helped us focus on one thing and one thing only, and this was the cross-platform agenda. But what it meant is that we had to take our baby, our team's baby, and to put it in second place.
Which means then I had to go through a bunch of very difficult conversations in order to engage everyone to this idea. Because the process that Edik and I just went through of avoidance and resistance, I now had to take all the teams together with us through their own process of avoiding and resisting and counter-arguing. But eventually, after a few weeks of us going out and engaging and explaining and absorbing all this resistance and working with it and guiding people to the right direction, we had our new North Star. And during this process, we came out with a few interesting learnings. First, what we're taught to do as product managers, what we're used to do, is to keep the product and UX that low and to double down on what works, on what is successful. By catching this wave, we basically needed to do the exact opposite. Merciless scoping, collecting product and UX that we will eventually have to pay back, and potentially even making some of our customers angry for the short term. And the tricky part is that in order to be successful, we needed to be all in. We needed to be entirely focused on executing this change and doing nothing except this. We had to be bold enough to get on this wave, learn how to ride it our way, and fully embrace it.
So to sum it up, the ocean in front of us is always full of waves, and it's always full of changes. And we think that our role as PMs and as leaders in the organization is to find these, no matter how big they are, no matter how scary they are, no matter how hard it is for us to make this decision to change. And we should all be aware that while going through this process, we will fight ourselves, we will fight our own biases. And we should be aware of that, and then it can help us overcome it. Because otherwise, it's super easy to stay and keep hugging the tree, even though you might eventually fail. So we want to encourage all of you, when you're back to your offices on Monday, to look ahead of you, catch your new wave, and ride it all the way to success.
And who knows, you might even enjoy the ride.
Thank you.